One of your famed road gigs was it Front of House Sound for Booker T and the MGs?
Yeah.
You went on tour with them?
Went on tour with them. Not really sure how that happened. I guess it was during the period of when I was working, doing live sound at a club called JP's in Manhattan, and Trax was another club that we had. And I don't know if it was Lee Housekeeper, it might have been the same producer that did the Catfish album the night I finished it. I heard the group, the Beatles album. But yeah, went on tour with them. We went all down south. We played in Nashville. Was there a place called the Bijou or something down there? I remember several venues. I remember the most disappointing night. We got to this 10,000-seater, I think, in Tennessee someplace, and Grand Funk Railroad was the main act. And we were going to open for Grand Funk Railroad, and I get to work on a Midas console, this Tasco company, sound company, huge, awesome rig. I mean, I brought up the kick drum, and I was like, there's a God, you know. This is a system. We're gonna, it's gonna be my best night ever on the road. And we didn't do it because Booker they wouldn't guarantee him the money from the door. He said, unless you guarantee it, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So he canceled the show. So I never got to do it. Soundcheck was great, though.
What year was this about?
73 or 4.
Okay, so they were pretty big. So Jim, I'd like to get a tour of your studio, but before we do that, a couple other artists I wanted to ask you about. B.B. King.
B.B. King was a part of the Newport Jazz Festival stuff that we did when, I guess it was getting too rowdy in Newport, and they decided to move the concerts to Manhattan.
That's what they got for going electric, man.
Right. So I did a show with him at Alice Tully Hall, I think it was, and I didn't even know that it was released. I found it online. Well, I had a credit. There was a link with credits on it with my name on it, and the link took me to the album. I said,
Which album was it?
The Best of the Blues. I did Count Basie and Duke Ellington on that run. You know, several days of recordings.
Yeah.
And I also did a lot of things for King Biscuit Flower Hour.
Oh, sure.
Curtis Mayfield. Is that who we were talking about before? You asked me about the guitar player, and I said it wasn't that person, but it was Curtis Mayfield was the guy who played on Tom Rush's album.
Really?
And we didn't use it. And I recorded him at the Banana Fish Garden recordings for Don Kirshner's rock concerts.
Oh, yeah. That stuff was re-released on DVD, a lot of the Kirshner stuff.
Well, Edgar Winter and Ricky Derringer and I did a Flipside TV show video that somebody says they have, some guy who releases old vintage video shows. That was the same day that Lennon, that's the day I met John Lennon, or John Lennon met me apparently, because I was in doing Johnny Winter in the studio for this Flipside show, and Ricky and I were on camera talking about, you know, let's take it from the top, and when we get to the second verse, try a little this. And I said, yeah, maybe I'll kick in a little reverb and blah, blah, blah. We just made up all this stuff to say on camera. And then I hit the record button, and the 16-track machine lights went on, and the tape rolled, and they said, cut. And they went out into the studio to do the band, to video the band. John Lennon is out in the reception area. This is at the record plant. I'm still at the board running the audio feed for the video truck of what they're doing out in the studio. And I turn, and it's John Lennon. I see them out of my corner of my eye, and I go, oh my God, it's him, it's one of them, it's, you know. I mean, at this point, I already was in the studio with George, I was in the studio with McCartney during the Ram album at Columbia, and now there's John.
Yeah.
And he's working at the record plant now. He had just started working there. I don't think I knew that day. I just couldn't believe it, that he and Yoko and the Hell's Angels and the David Peel's Lower East Side Band or whatever they were called, Give Peace a Chance band, were all waiting in the wings to do, no pun intended, but you know, out in the reception area to do this video, also this flip side thing, which I saw recently on YouTube. There was an excerpt from his interview, and I think they pulled it. But he was just standing there, and I turned around and he nodded to me, and I nodded to him. You know, we had a nodding acquaintance. He didn't say nodding to me, I didn't say nodding to him. You can cut that later. And anyway, at one point I'm thinking, you know, my God, what am I going to say? What should I do? And what I should have done was tell him to just come in and sit down and get comfortable.
Maybe offer him a cup of coffee, Jim.
I was too blown away about it. And preoccupied anyway with what I was doing. And I had hit the remote control for the 4-track machine, which was right near him. And of course the 4 record lights went on. And we often ran 4-track to delay the echo to the chamber so it would have a little slap back to the reverb and get it out of the way of the vocals. And so he saw the 4-track, of course, which I'm sure he was very familiar with, and he went and he looked at me and says, don't erase the master then. And I was like, oh my God, he just talked to me, what should I say? And I said, well, at this point it couldn't hurt these guys. And he laughed, and then I turned again and he was gone. And a few days later, the door opens to Studio B as I'm walking by, and he says, hey Jim, you got a minute? You tell me what you think of this. And he was working on Harry Nilsson's album.
Oh.
And well, there's a whole story of things that goes on with that, but
Yeah.
we hung out a lot in the studio and
Yeah.
had a great time. And I guess the last time I saw him was about, he lived a block away from Trax, the club we had on the west side. And I'm hearing some guy calling me. You know, Jim, hey Jim, you know, in the city streets of Manhattan. And I look across the street and it's John Lennon calling me. And I said, awesome. And I ran over and I said, hey, we're building this club. Why don't you come down and see the club? It was downstairs on 72nd Street, a block from the Dakota. So I brought him down. I introduced him to everybody and said, this is a great place for you to come. People won't bug you here. They won't groupie you out or anything.
Yeah.
You know. And he said, great. And I walked him back upstairs, and you know, it was the last time I saw him. A year later, he was dead.
Yeah.
So.
All right. We should probably talk a bit about the Ram sessions as well, which I didn't ask you about.
Well,
Paul McCartney Ram was 1970.
69.
69. Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's 69. Maybe. Well, you might be right. Maybe it was 70. I mean, I was there until 71. So I don't know. Everything is like 69 to me. But
Sure.
I guess it could have been anywhere in those 3 years. And Tim Gillen was doing the engineering for that. He was a jazz engineer, and he was a friend of. Paul was a friend of the producer that Tim worked with. So the producer put Tim on the session. But Tim asked me, you know, if I would do some of it. So I did some of it, and I would consult with him on things about it. He would ask me about miking the drums, or, you know, doing just, you know, because he was a jazz engineer.
Sure.
Just, you know, you should be doing this. And I said, you know, you're right. I should be doing this. Why aren't I doing it? But, I mean, it was fabulous. I didn't spend much time at all on it, and the fascinating things for me were having the kids in the studio. The daughter I'm not sure what the daughter's name was, but anyway, we used to have the scribble strips on the console where we wrote down drums, guitar, and so on to identify the channels. And the kid would sit there with their crayons and color it all in with little pictures of birds and sunshines, and it was really a novelty because Columbia Records was so clinical, sterile. It was very white walls and white floors. Everything was bright, and there was no real atmosphere. It was very bureaucratic, and it was like being in a hospital or something. Matter of fact, when my engineer asked me about getting into that business, working for Columbia Records, I didn't want the job. I said, I don't want to work here. It's like working in a hospital. So I needed the money, so that's why I took it. But that helped me with my audition because I asked for a ridiculous amount of money because I didn't care, and I got it. So that, the baby's in the playpen behind the console, and you got kids running around, and Linda running around. I had met Linda a couple of times before she married Paul, actually with the people who lived in the building at Studio 3. And at the scene, she came to the scene. So, it was just the tracking stuff, great tracks, and Paul was amazing about everything and very particular about everything. There was no question about what he wanted to do.
Sure.
He was very clear and precise about it, wanted specific things to happen. And then the album came out. I was down in Florida, and one of the girls from Columbia Records sent me a copy, an 8-track. I had a TR6 convertible with an 8-track machine, so she sent me an 8-track. I heard it there. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But whatever, a minute with Paul would have been plenty.
Yeah.
And then Ringo showed up at JP's one night, and we had a beer.
Did you get to work with Ringo in the studio?
No. No, but I met him.
Yeah.
So that was the full Beatles. Yeah. And Brian Epstein broke in a water pipe for me once.
He did what to a water pipe?
He broke it in.
Broke in a water pipe.
Yeah. If you know what that is. I was invited upstairs to the person who lived above the studio at Studio 3, and he bought me a present, this water pipe.
Yeah.
And he lit it, and gave it to who did I just say? Brian Epstein. And Brian did it. Yeah. Handed it to me, and he said, Deering said to me, "That's for you, Jimmy." I said, "Thanks," and I went back down to the studio. I went like, "Wow, that was cool."
Cool.